So I forgot to hit record the first time, so I'm gonna try to summarize. So the way that I come to terms with the 52 Earths, but then also 6 billion, and also there's dimensional graveyards, part of DC Comics, is like this. Okay, so you know how scientists constantly say vibrations, the universe is vibrating. What that is actually pulsating. So if you take the entirety of the Alps, that's 2,000 mountains that are 6 kilometers long, and you compress it down to the size of a tree, and you compress it the exact same way, right? And then you add in a little bit more compression, something like Pikachu versus Godzilla levels of compression, you end up with a black hole that is 11 helium atoms wide in diameter. So that's your dwarf child limit. So atoms are made up of smaller stuff, electrons are made up of smaller stuff, and that stuff is constantly spreading out and returning like a heartbeat. That's what people mean when they're talking about vibrations in science documentaries. They're not talking about vibrations, they're talking about pulsations. Now, vibrations within the pulsations, that's energy. So when you have electrical current, you're not actually moving electrons in the direction of the current. What you're actually doing is, in between the individual heartbeats of an electron existing in our relative, our momentum, our frequency of existence, and this is something to do with underwater communications, whatever, like cross-continental communications. The first time continents were connected through the phone wire, that was a solved problem with that got solved. So you basically, the energy primarily moves in the field, and what people mean by the field is the stuff of the electron spreads out and then returns. So the energy that is being stored is actually just that the energy that's moving is just kinetic energy moving through a medium that is not very solid, right? It's the field. So the actual electrons, at the moment when they're particles, when they are solid, they're moving very slowly in the other direction, like millimeters per hour, millimeters per day, that sort of rate of speed of moving backwards in the direction that's opposite the way that the current is moving. The current is moving through the field, the electromagnetic field around the electrons. Yeah. So in between every heartbeat of the individual particles that make up the greater particles, the heartbeats of the electrons, the subparticles of the electrons and whatever, there are moments where we essentially do not exist in reality. There is a moment when our stuff is just spread out and about to return. These are femtosecond level moments, but they do exist. Basically, on some scale of reality, we instantly exist and don't exist, and then exist and then don't exist, and then exist and then don't exist, etc. So there's a heartbeat. That's the pulsation of reality, which is usually what people mean when they're talking about the reality vibrating and things vibrating. So basically, the way I understand it is, because there's smaller and smaller and smaller scales of existence, the multiverse basically exists both in between those moments, and all the memories of the other versions of Earth, the other timelines, also sort of exist, but they haven't come into existence. They're on this scale of not existence, but pseudo-existence, this scale of pseudo-existence where the stuff of reality hasn't, the energy of the stuff of reality has not moved into any of those other realities. So the 52 is what functionally, the number of realities that functionally have energy and are stable in this sort of multiverse cluster. And of course, some realities have some amount of energy, small amounts of energy because of all kinds of technological reasons, and some realities don't have any energy, and there's probably countless 52 Earth clusters, and time doesn't need to move at the same rate in every reality. So, yeah. And this kind of makes sense the more you think about, well, if I time travel back 10 minutes and someone in the future time travels back 10 hours before me or in between my time travel and changes my future, the moments when I leave relative reality and when I come into relative reality, those would change. So if you're gonna leave relative time and go into this sort of space outside of time, then a more real time applies to you. So the way that you leave your own timeline and travel back in time, the moment when you're leaving your timeline, you're stepping into a different level of time. You're hopping through time. Yeah, so the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. I don't know if I've explained it properly, but that's how I feel that the DC multiverse can be explained, sort of.